What are the factors that help people wake up quickly? One of the benefits of having worked with so many people as they're going through the awakening process is that I get a sense of which factors really benefit waking up and which seem to hinder the process. So in this video, I want to describe three characteristics or three qualities I see that really accelerate the awakening process. People that possess these qualities for various reasons seem to wake up faster than most. In addition to these three characteristics that they have, I want to point out one simple activity or action that they take that seems to be a key difference. The first characteristic or attribute that helps people wake up quickly is a willingness to be authentic. At the very least, this means to be authentic with yourself or with a teacher or someone who can point you down this path. Primarily, this means that it's inherently uncomfortable to live in an internal world, always trying to construct an external persona to interface with a world of other people living in their minds, constructing external personas. There are certain benefits to buying into this belief of the persona, the collective delusion. It can give us a sense of belonging, a sense of validation. But this type of authenticity I'm talking about means that we at least admit to ourselves that this is largely false, that it's not deeply satisfying, that just fitting in a world of inauthenticity isn't enough to deliver us true freedom, peace. It's not enough to allow us to live in harmony with our true nature. The second characteristic or trait that I see in people who wake up quickly is that they find thought inherently uncomfortable. For whatever reason, some people pick this up, that living in a world of thought, trying to preserve your internal boundaries of who I am, how I relate to others, where I fit in, where I don't fit in, is just uncomfortable. It leads to suffering. You don't have to fully understand and appreciate the mechanism of this, but some sense of it and honesty with yourself that it's not working. It's not really getting you what you want. All that mental seeking, all of that positioning inside your own mind is just not delivering the goods. It's not leading you to peace. Seeing that, being willing to look into ways of dispelling that illusion of the thought self will take you a long way on this path of realization. The third characteristic I see that helps people wake up quickly is a willingness to be uncomfortable. This doesn't mean that you have to torture yourself. It doesn't even mean that you have to exert yourself in extreme ways like meditating in painful positions for days on end, although sometimes you might find yourself in those situations. But for certain psyches, that sort of activity can even reinforce the ego. It can help you avoid a different kind of discomfort, which is the discomfort of vulnerability. So know yourself. Be willing to see what it is that makes you uncomfortable, what it is that you really don't want to see about yourself, the parts of yourself you're not interested in exploring. And know that people who wake up quickly are, for whatever reason, willing to explore those uncomfortable and yucky areas of themselves. The ego stays alive in shadows, in where we don't look. It loves avoidance. You could say that in the end, suffering really is equivalent to avoidance. But in a practical sense, the mechanism of avoidance can be investigated on a daily basis. And we do it all the time. So a willingness to look into those places that are uncomfortable, psychologically and emotionally, is hugely beneficial for this process to propagate. So those three characteristics are things I see in people who seem to wake up very quickly. It doesn't mean you have to have all of those, and I hope you don't take this to be a criticism of anything. It's just something that if you can feel into what those mean or what they're about or where you might be holding yourself up, it really can accelerate the process for you. Additionally, I want to mention briefly that, interestingly, it's not so much certain spiritual practices or traditions or belief in certain dogmas or teachers that seems to be the linchpin on whether people wake up fast or not, although I think it's very common to believe this. So it's very common for people to believe, well, I'm in Zen and that's the best path, or I'm in, I believe in Advaita Vedanta videos. That means there's no one here, there's nothing to do, and there's no practice, no practicer, etc. Or Buddhism is clearly the right path and all other paths are somewhat inferior, or Dzogchen is better than Zen, or whatever, right? We may not overtly say these things, but if we hold those sorts of views, we can get mixed up in all sorts of behaviors that really distract us from just facing the truth of what's going on inside us all day long. So it's not as much about what type of meditation you do, how much you meditate or don't meditate, whether you practice mindfulness constantly or on occasion, whether you believe therapy is helpful or don't believe therapy is helpful, whether you believe emotion work is helpful or whether you don't. These I see as less important than the three factors I mentioned. And lastly, I want to point out one activity or action that seems to dramatically increase the rate of the awakening process, and that is inquiry. It's not necessarily a certain type of inquiry or from a certain tradition. It's the quality and nature of the inquiry itself. You could say that by performing proper inquiry or undertaking inquiry, you're already incorporating those three characteristics into the inquiry itself. First of all, we're being authentic. And in all authenticity, we're admitting that we're not fully authentic. But by continuing to ask, continuing to look, what's motivating me? What am I hiding? What am I feeling? What do these thoughts say? Where can I find the thinker? Where can I find I? By continuing to ask these questions and being willing to probe experientially into the spaces to which these questions point, we become more and more authentic. We shine light in shadows again and again and again. So then we're overcoming our habit of inauthenticity through honest and sincere inquiry. And since inquiry begins in the mind, begins as a conceptual question or pointing, it tends to disentangle us from the belief structures in thought and helps us shine light on what it is we actually believe, what it is we actually want, and what it is we're avoiding. So it takes care of the second characteristic as well. And third characteristic, and lastly, with proper inquiry, there will be times when things become uncomfortable. Sometimes it's just sort of uncomfortable to do inquiry. You can feel boredom or disorientation or flatness or frustration. And then sometimes it leads into spaces that we weren't ready for, that surprise us, even existential fear. So proper inquiry takes care of the third characteristic or trait as well. I wrote an entire chapter on inquiry and many of the points that I think are very important to do inquiry properly in my book, Awake, It's Your Turn. So if you're interested, check that out.